So Hades 2 came almost a month ago now, and the general reception collectively agreed on one thing, that it's a great game. Its Metacritic score being the highest this year made that incredibly clear, along with positive impressions from its early access days. So all's well then. If you're anything like me, usually keeping up with game news, then you'd have heard that the game had a really bad ending. One that most people agree on, that its quality and setup are way below expectations. I was only a few hours in at the time, but the thought always loomed over me. How could an extremely polished 30 to 50 hour game be ruined by its ending? Well, I just reached the ending of Hades 2, and by sheer luck, I never saw the ending everyone was talking about. A couple of days ago, just when I was only 2 or 3 runs away from finishing the game, I saw that the devs updated the game with a preview build with an overhauled ending. And knowing what I know, I immediately jumped aboard. And yeah, I actually enjoyed the ending. Wasn't spectacular, but wasn't anywhere near what people said on the old ending. This overhaul, as well as actually rolling credits, made me reflect on my experience thus far with Hades 2 and how its particular development cycle might have actually gotten it in this situation. First though, let me actually get a look at the old ending and then compare the two, seeing where things might have gone wrong at first. Alright, wow, that was really different. The newer ending is definitely much better. I'm so glad I played this version, and I commend the dev team for getting on the biggest criticism of the game so soon, especially in the fact that they had entirely different narrative events happen for the ending. They not only rewrote it, but they had to record a decent amount of voice acting and then integrate all of that in the game within just a month. Great job, Supergiant. Take the compliment well, because I'm going to analyze and say some not so nice things as the video continues. So from here on out, it's full spoiler territory for the ending. For both endings, actually. The main difference between the two is in 2 parts of the ending. The final dialogue in the mirror between Melanie and Zagreus, where in the old one, it honestly was really quick and to the point, very much to a fault. Mel just tells Zag to go do the thing. Zag questions it exactly once if there's no other way. Mel confirms that it's the only way, and thus it's done. Zag goes killy. The main problems here is that first, it does jack shit to set up what's going to happen, where Zag spares Kronos in the end, even though he barely shows any hint of that. And the bigger problem is that they barely speak and discuss this. Yeah, I get it, Kronos is going to wake up, oh no, but they've had longer conversations before, and it's not like they're not capable speakers, because Zag and Mel can say what feels like an entirety of 2 or 3 big sentences in one breath. So why doesn't Zag give any hint of doubt or not following the plan? Why doesn't he suggest the plan to Mel? What does he have to fear? He's still the one that has the final say in the end either way. And why doesn't Mel take time to give Zag more context on what's been happening? Context about Kronos and his past that Zag doesn't know. And that's what the new ending fixes. It sets it up through dissolution of time so that Mel and Zag can finally have the time to speak extensively, which is exactly when that should happen. And the next big change is that Mel is the one who suggests the plan this time, making it so that instead of Zag stealing the spotlight at the very last second and very abruptly, almost becoming the protagonist of the ending instead of Mel, Mel is now the one taking the reins again. This also introduces a new problem of Mel's intention of trying to get Kronos to cooperate, which is never really set up except in the fact that we know Kronos and what happened to him, but nothing on Mel's side. But I bet it would have taken a lot more work to set that up that was required for the ending, so I very much prefer the alternative that we got quickly for now. The second significant change is in the memories from another timeline, that in which Zag does succeed in his plan and takes Kronos as a prisoner. In the old version, no one has any recollection of that happy timeline except Kronos and Zag, even when it had affected everyone else's lives, weirdly enough. And oh my god, it's so freaking funny watching that part after the timeline dream played out, when having witnessed the new ending before it. It just looks to me like they're all bickering and screaming at each other.
Prepare to suffer for all that you've done,
And you took me
wretch.
for a fool.
This wretch is
I ought to take my vengeance
So
on using his own tricks
you exist in
again.
this world until I say
Convenient.
otherwise.
You cast your dream time with... Enough!
And Kronos every now and then goes, "Ah, kill me, the pain of existing is so ouchy."
Now send me to the blasted void already. I have no desire to exist in such a world with all of you like this.
And everyone else is looking at Zag and Kronos being like, "The fuck are you on about?"
Wait, no. Sister, don't. Don't you remember?
And the funniest thing is, it immediately switches from that to, okay, we give you a chance, Kronos, good boy.
Then he shall have his chance.
Then the instant cut afterwards where the narrator shows up and basically says, yep, all fine and dandy here, now all's well that ends well. Woohoo.
They and the Titan picked up many pieces of the past.
Just freaking hilarious, man. And yeah, I get it now. Wouldn't have been the slightest bit funny if I saw that ending firsthand. Especially as it would have exacerbated tenfold issues with the narrative that I had. Mainly that it was much less engaging and almost purposeless. Alright, from here on out, I'll be more critical even if Hades 2 was and is a great game to play for me, as I put around 40 hours of gameplay into it and I sure enjoyed most of it. Keep in mind that what follows are my opinions, and if you like the story, more power to you. I wanted to, and honestly I had on paper every reason to like the story. I mean, from an objective standpoint, the jaw-dropping style all over it speaks for itself with one glance. And the mythology and setting are exciting to me as they've always been in other media. The voice acting is probably some of the best in the whole industry, and how the story integrates within gameplay is still handled well enough here. But I really just did not feel it here. No matter how hard I tried, I just did not seem to care enough. After like the 20-hour mark, the desire to skip the dialogue started to seep in slowly more and more, but I resisted out of the sheer quality of the voice acting and wanting to see where the story goes. And it's definitely not that big of a deal to listen through dialogue. But still, what made this weirder to me is the fact that I did not face this problem with the first Hades. So when this one's more polished, with a grander and higher stakes story, with every character speaking to you glowing in all the right places, firing up those delicious neuron receptors in your brain, why is it that I just can't care? Well, actually, I can think of a couple of reasons why. The main reason here, and the one that I think cascades into all sorts of issues, is that the story being told here doesn't fit within the Hades formula anymore. The fact that it's another save the world from impending doom type of story, while that type can absolutely be done greatly and is widely used anyway, I don't think the Hades formula was capable of realizing that story well. Not to say that the devs are not capable of writing it well, because I believe they absolutely can. But it felt to me like they were locked into this formula and in a sense almost limited by it. Now, we all know that this is Supergiant's first sequel, and you know it's actually a pretty good one in my opinion. But part of me wonders if the pressure, even if unfelt by the developers, was a limiting factor in their development, because they undoubtedly felt the need to make a better, bigger, and richer sequel. That might have led to the unfitting high-stakes story and the slew of other problems I'm gonna mention in a bit. They might have actually rode themselves into a bit of a corner. Now, I have no doubt that they wanted to work on this and that they liked the Hades formula enough to work on it more. As I said, this is not a problem they are the reason for. It's more like it's just a problem that they face when crafting a sequel for a game they made. But back on topic, the story's grandeur does not help with the fact that it starts abruptly and then slowly lets you piece out what happened. Now, more characters and all the events and context since the last game need to be either built up or just given to you in exposition, both of which would take time to be done well. And I feel that's the case here. I can see traces of them trying to build up character stories and the events leading up to the current events we're actually going through, of Kronos on Typhon attacks, things like Hecate's past and how it motivated her to train Millennium, Poseidon splitting the earth and creating the Rift of Sicily, that's my understanding at least, and why the Olympians can't handle Typhon on their own because they're quote-unquote busy dealing with his forces, or want to keep the palace clean, or they don't want to use a weapon that would devastate Olympus, which we actually don't get to know what it is, or Typhon going resistant to their power, or many other reasons that are scattered throughout dialogues. All of them completely valid, and all of them feeling completely bullshit to me. They tried, okay? Supergiant really tried to give reasons as to why every bit of the story is happening, and I did not buy most of it. I still recognize the effort they put in, but it felt like the direction, size, and type of story this was against them. It doesn't feel right, no matter how you slice it. Having the whole world, with all these powerful beings, depend on Millennium and her witchcraft, and her alone, even if she was trained for this specific task. I honestly had expected the build-up to go over how Kronos built himself bit by bit. How did he plan everything? How he made deals with allies to help him put himself together and get back at Olympus? How he created failsafes for himself and his plan? But no, we get none of that. He just does all that. And then he overpowers everyone. The end. but this one witch is able to resist his powers and defeat him. Yeah. Honestly, all the attempts to make all what happened make sense might as well not be there, because in the end it all boils down to one thing. Kronos took over and unleashed an army and Typhon, somehow. And now everything's in danger. If you really think about it, there's literally not a single important detail in that description of the stakes of the story missing. And hey, perhaps I just didn't reach the dialogues and events where everything gets so much more fleshed out and clearer. But remember, I finished the game on the new ending, which takes longer to get to nonetheless, and I put over 40 hours in it. I mean, anytime now game? This is reflected most in the character dialogues overall. They take so excruciatingly long to progress into anything meaningful. Much longer than the game would take you to finish, I bet. I mean, does Nemesis really need to constantly give me that attitude instead of opening up as to why she does what she does for this long and how she feels? Did Dora have to reveal that she has a history with Prometheus right before my last run to beat the game? Same with knowing that Narcissus and Echo know each other. And it took Eris in the base like 7 nights of constant vague hinting at what is the real reason she's a boss fight and is opposing us on the surface, other than that she's crazy like that, and so much more. I like the dialogue, I really do, in isolation and at face value. But knowing there's so much more behind these dialogues, why not just get to the interesting stuff a bit faster? I don't need characters to comment on my failures every time or tell me about the story event that I experienced firsthand. Looking at you, Odysseus, never once telling me something in advance. Never once telling me something in advance. Oh my god. Something in advance. Never once telling me something in advance to anticipate. Tactician. Or the many other relevant but repeated topics the characters talk about. I want first and foremost to get to know the characters, understand them, and care for them. Then, and in turn, care so much more for what they have to say. You can't keep that essence of their character barred until the end of the game and through me constantly facilitating alcoholism. You have meaning and potential inside them. Unleash it as soon as possible to pull me in. I get that you have created a great dialogue system that can have them react to how I died to a small rat on steroids. But is that really what I needed to hear at the time? And hey, perhaps I do. That system is pretty fun. But can you give me another dialogue chance at least to hear what can potentially expand the character in front of me after the fact? Making the game take more runs to complete is definitely not a solution, as it would only result in less people completing the game and reaching those character arcs. Neither is depending on nectar progression, because that's a limited resource, and for the characters that I maxed the alcohol love bar on as much as I could before the story's end, they definitely don't get anywhere near a conclusion of their arcs either. Still only small hints. It definitely doesn't help either that the dialogue reward for beating a run isn't really that rewarding. Especially on the surface. In terms of narrative advancement or expansion, you get nearly nothing in return. You meet Zeus, Hera, Apollo, and sometimes Demeter, who after your unbelievable victory over Typhon, pat you on the back and tell you, "Hop up, back at it kiddo, outta here." This feels like another victim of the story scale growing too big. In the first game, I'd be excited after every run because the scale was smaller and more personal. And the game had succeeded at conveying to me how much did Zagreus truly want to get out of the underworld and meet his mother, and how he held precious every moment there. And that reason for the game continuing on and repeating made complete sense. And now I also wonder if maybe the development was not just affected by the game being a sequel. What if the early access could have made some design problems even worse? Because having a start for the story, then building incrementally from there in early access, might have had to do with how jumbled the narrative can feel sometimes. It for sure had to do for the abrupt ending at least, the only thing that was not present during early access. And within that period as well, what players usually care about and value are gameplay above all, so the story might have been slept on a bit more than is preferable, just due to the nature of the feedback they would be receiving, probably tending towards how the game plays and its mechanics and systems. And another potential problem could be that, as far as I know, story was added in chunks in the early access phase of Hades 2. and I would imagine someone playing early access would typically be jumping back into the game every new big update, which would feel a whole lot different than someone who plays through the game start to finish in one period when it releases. So that could have affected how the story played out as well, and the feedback. And maybe it let some problems slip through because the feedback that came from a subset of players experiencing the game in a different way in the early access period was unlike how the players of the release version would actually play. But in the end, I'm not saying any of this is the case either way. I am merely speculating out loud what could be the cause of some of my pain points with this great game. And since I actually wasn't an early access player, if any of you watching were, please let me know what you think most of all about what I said, and if it aligned in any way with how the early access period was. And in honesty, especially after fully seeing the ending, Zagreus in general is a much better character than Millennium, and an even further fitting character to what Hades is. Not only, as I just mentioned, is his motivations fleshed out and feel closer and thus connect to you easier, but his playful personality is perfectly fitting for the game, making for humorous and fun dialogue no matter who he talks to. And Mel, due to her origins and what she went through, her personality makes sense, and I wouldn't even say I don't like her because I do. But I think she'd be a better protagonist for a different type of game. And if there's any fun dialogue, it is usually carried by whoever Mel is speaking to, and rarely herself. And I don't envy the dev's position here. If they pour more quirkiness or fun personality into Millennium, it'll be difficult to make it immersive given the context of her upbringing and all that. And I'd like to note that the issues here wouldn't be as prominent if the game didn't build itself around its story and the characters and dialogue. But it did, and thus it stands out a whole lot more. And lastly, perhaps the formula of Hades was a one-time use kind of thing, and once I got familiar to it and understood how it works, it had a reduced effect on me this time around. I'm not saying that's surely the case, just more questioning it out loud, just like the previous speculations. It might be that my tastes are changing, or I wasn't in the mood, or a multitude of other reasons, even if I don't really think that's the case. Those were my story criticisms, and basically the center issue I had with the game. But while I'm at it, I want to talk about some of my other frustrations with Hades 2. While the gameplay part is absolutely wonderful, and it basically is just a whole lot of fun, no matter how you look at it, I merely wanted to improve even further. For my own selfish gains if nothing else, because I want to continue enjoying this game further, even after I've reached the ending. My immediate and biggest criticism here is in the fear system, which is unrewarding to say the least. See, there's a big problem with a roguelike such as this that has a set your own difficulty option, which is that you never know what's the right amount of difficulty, and it leaves you frustrated. The game does set for you fear thresholds tied to each weapon, which get you to hunt a specific boss and unlocks a resource if successful, but the problem with that is that if I find the game too easy still, setting the fear higher leads to two problems tied to progression. It makes you more probable to fail, and the run takes more time to clear, both hindering your progress, which is very much something you don't want to be doing. You don't want to not reach the marked boss, or worse, die at their fight. You don't want to be missing out on resources, especially in further stages, and you definitely don't want to keep failing runs and potentially prolong reaching the ending. All of these will cause you to continue missing out on upgrades that make you stronger or provide you with more options. But at the same time, you don't want the game to be too easy, or else you'll just be playing through 40 minutes or so on complete autopilot, which isn't exactly the worst thing, and I can sometimes want that, but if you're in for a decent challenge, you'd be unsatisfied. I find this problem would be mediated if increasing fear, for example, allowed you to earn additional resources as an offset to the increased time and risk of the run, instead of just being an adjustable difficulty meter at your own convenience. This, I think, would have made me feel better about increasing the difficulty and biting more than I can chew, because I chose to take that risk for the potential reward. And yes, the reward of being difficult is not enough, because I don't want to constantly experiment with all the modifiers and their combinations, nor do I want to be in a state of constant doubt about whether I set my fear modifiers at a good balance or did it tip on the easier or harder side. That is my subjective take on that system. I also dislike how certain quality of life options are locked behind story progression and incantations that take up resources. It isn't the most annoying thing, but at the same time what makes it so is that its presence is completely unwarranted. It gives exactly nothing of value for the game. It would only be better if it would be removed, in my opinion, and if they're just always there. I mean, imagine you spend a good 20 seconds or so planting 6 garlics in your soil, and then on the next run you unlock the plant all in one go incantation. While yeah, it was just about 20 seconds, and if you count all the previous planting, it still wouldn't amount to much. But that doesn't stop you from feeling like you wasted those minutes and seconds for arguably no reason. Another complaint is your ability to view boons, which I actually don't mind being locked behind an incantation this time. I think it plays well into experimenting at the start. But more precisely, my problem is how long it takes for you to view them for your build crafting. First, you have to go through a couple of windows which take more time than I would like, and second, you have to search for boons one by reading each of them to know which one has an effect you like. You grow familiar with them, of course, as time goes on, but usually you still need to search a good amount. I mean, imagine I'm building specifically for an Omega or Charged special build. I'd basically have to scroll through each Olympian, then each of their boons listed in 8 separate pages, and then quickly skim each and save in my memory each of those boons. My suggestion here is to keep a separate menu specific for boons themselves, one that you can sort and filter by various keywords in the game. And there are not that many anyway, and they're already indicated in each of the boons descriptions, so I imagine it wouldn't take too long to implement. At least the fundamentals would be there. And now you can filter by Omega Special and have a list of them that you can access more quickly through less navigation of menus. Especially useful for something you'd be using a whole lot in the game. Here's another one. The Arcana system first seems like it allows for a variety of build crafting options, but soon enough it turns out to be very minimal in terms of customization, because a good chunk of the cards are somewhat no-brainers that you'd be shooting yourself in the foot if you didn't pick them up. And then others can be really niche, so you're rarely gonna pick them up anyway. Another nitpick, but this one is very minor, the small optional narrations present throughout the world would have felt better if they played automatically when triggered, but were skippable instead, keeping them still optional. It would have worked well if it was playing and filled up my time as I'm collecting plants, or changing keepsakes, or fishing for example. And to end on another nitpick, the dual boon fights have no narrative place in this game. They serve the purpose in gameplay and nothing else. They fighting amongst themselves during a raging war over such a stupid thing feels so out of character, even for the prideful Olympians. That's most of what I had in mind, not much, because guess what? This game plays freaking amazingly. And you know, if you think that I hate the developers, or I think they didn't put in enough work, or they shouldn't have done early access, or they themselves were intentionally rushing the ending, heck, if there's anything I know for sure, it's that Supergiant poured all their work and love into this, and I have absolutely no doubt in that. I've enjoyed this just as much as I've enjoyed all their previous games, if not more. It's just that I wish the story had more impact and legitimate presence. But that's all from me here. I'm looking forward to see what Supergiant cooks up next. If you enjoyed this, be sure to leave a like on the video. If you didn't, feel free to dislike instead. And in both cases, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And I'll see you next time.